Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Big League Breakdowns for day 14 of Around the League in 30 days as we make a stop in Anaheim to check in on the Angels after their woeful season in 2024, where they had their worst record as a franchise, only up from here. Joining me today, Will and Bobby, as we again stop for is this our first California team? I think it is. In our
Considering that the A's are in Sacramento, no.
Oh, that's right, that's right. But they don't go by Sacramento, so they
No, they
count.
may not be
True.
identified with Sacramento, but
Regardless, we are in California where there's a lot of baseball being played. And again, probably the worst team out of the bunch from last season. So let's take a look at that lineup that they have projected for the 2025 season. Starting at the top with the big man himself, Mike Trout. Luis Rengifo in the second spot. Taylor Ward back looking for a bounce back year after he was rumored to get traded last year. And then some veteran additions. George Soler, Jorge Soler, Johan Moncada, Logan O'Hoppe, Nolan Shawnoel, Joe Adell, and Tim Anderson down there at the bottom. Darno, JD Davis, Kevin Newman, Pirates legend, absolutely not. And Phillies legend Mickey Moniak round
absolutely
out
not.
the roster. Zach Neto also going to be a part of that as well, but injured right now and is out till April. And then looking at the pitching staff, they bring in Yusei Kikuchi to be their ace, who's, by the way, that picture's crazy. Jose Soriano, who had a nice year for them last year in that two spot. Tyler Anderson and Kyle Hendricks, the longtime Cub, comes in with Reed Detmers at the bottom. In the bullpen, they add Kenley Jansen, who we know how dominant of a closer he's been at times. Does he still have that juice? We will find out. Ben Joyce, the hard throwing right-hander, says he's looking to throw, I think 106 he's looking to throw this year. So that'll be interesting. And then a bunch of lesser known guys. Jose Suarez there. Garrett McDonald's comes in. He was uh, a minor league guy for the Dodgers. But yeah, that is about it. That is your projected roster for your 2025 Los Angeles Angels. Now, getting into the storylines, I think the first thing to talk about is they made a lot of additions in the form of veteran signings. And, do you think these are good signings? Do you think it's enough? Like, you look at their additions and there's a large quantity of them, but it's a lot of guys that, like, feel like they haven't had their footing in a while.
They refuse to rebuild. That's the short answer. They will never. They had the time, I should say, to trade away players when they were struggling to try and build for the future. Um, Art, good old Artie, could not get rid of cannot trade away players in their primes when the team was down and look for the future, which is now. And because of that, he is now getting an old bag of retirement home people that if they're not gonna retire soon, it's because they're basically backup jobs and they believe they have something left in their career. And that's all this team is a bunch of pieces that are it's a bunch of puzzle pieces that don't go together with the hopes that it can create a beautiful picture and hopefully at least do some competitive have some competitiveness this season. But the Angels are just again a lost cause, old injured players. There are some young guys to look into, I guess, but I mean they are still probably the bottom of the division and it's not even close.
Yeah, they do have like Logan O'Hoppe's a nice piece. He's kind
Phillies
of
legend.
a Phillies legend, of course. He kind of has come over and been a nice acquisition for them. Um, Nolan Shawnoel, I think as well. Like he's somebody. He's still only 23, so he has time to grow. But yeah, you look at their roster. You got a 33-year-old Mike Trout, a 31-year-old Taylor Ward, a 33-year-old Jorge Soler, almost 30-year-old Moncada. Tim Anderson, 31. And then also, of course, the name we didn't mention as well, Anthony Rendon, who has barely played for them at all since he's been there. Also on the injured list. Maybe he'll come back this year, but I don't know. It seems like he's just collecting a paycheck at this point. But yeah, they have they like okay, you look at this roster and you look at this roster like 4, 5, 6 years ago, like this was not a bad roster, but we're past that. Like Tim Anderson was great. I don't know what he has left in him. Soler has been a home run guy, but and he still will be for them, of course, but he's not the player he once was. So there's just a lot of, again, old guys, even their bench. Darno comes in, 36, JD Davis, who might end up platooning, 31, Newman. I cannot believe that guy's still in the league. 31. And then Moniak, like, it seemed like they were trying to develop him, but I don't know how much they're gonna get out of him. So it's just like kind of, Will, it kind of just feels like a bunch of like the almost the toys, like that's who they got right now.
Yeah, the Island of Misfit Toys and this whole team still feels like the idea is they want to build around Trout, but Trout hasn't been healthy in a long time, and that's not something that you can rely on anymore, at least not unless you're going to put him as a full-time DH. And outside of Trout, if Trout can be at all a fraction of what he used to be, there's not really a whole lot of great pieces. It's just a lot of people past their prime or young guys that haven't taken steps yet that you don't really know how much of a peak they really will have from at least what they've shown so far and what they've done in the system. So they're kind of, and they're stuck with Trout too. They had their time way back when to get rid of him, but, and they had good teams, like you said, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, at least from a lineup sense. But the problem was always that they would sign really bad pitching choices. And then those pitchers would either get hurt or absolutely fall apart. And so they just continue to not I just the Angels are just it's just, they're a frustrating team because when you have the best player for the longest time in baseball, and then you had Shohei Ohtani, so you had the two best players in all of baseball for years, and then you do nothing, and then everyone is screaming like, just rebuild, do something, have some hope, and they're just like, no, we have hope, and then you make signings like this. It's like there's absolutely no reason to get behind them because it's a bunch of just non-complimentary pieces. It's just nothing makes sense, and it's just really frustrating, awkward to look at.
I mean, even you look at their pitching, they have three guys that are over the age of 33, almost 34. Like Kikuchi is going to be turning 34 this year. They have Anderson, they have Hendricks. It's just not, it's not great. And Jose Soriano was pretty good for them last year. I think he had like a sub 4 ERA and like 100 and something innings, but um, how much can, I mean, he's your your second starter, so that's kind of not the most ideal situation to be in. Again, maybe how much you get out of Kenley Jansen, but he's 37 now. Like, it really is, it's sad because you kind of like look at their additions. You're like, well, at least they made moves. You can say that, they did more than other teams, but then you like really looking at it, it's like they kind of they did the absolute minimum, and it sucks for their fans. I still, it sucks for Trout. Like, I mean, you I don't know. It's probably just me, but like, you forget that this team had Shohei Ohtani and missed the playoffs. Like, that seems unfathomable with how
Every
good he
year.
is. And like, and they had him and Mike Trout, and they couldn't make that work. And Trout is in that long deal now, and of course, like, he's a Philly area guy, so it was always like, oh, we'll go to the Phillies and stuff. And he ends up signing the deal, and now he's just stuck in mediocrity.
He's stuck in
And
purgatory.
he is. He literally is. I mean, speaking of
I,
Trout,
I I would say hell,
yeah.
not purgatory. Let's not say purgatory. He's not stuck in limbo. He's stuck in absolute hell, and he can't get out.
And let's talk about him because he's had a rough time of staying healthy, really being his big issue. But I mean, well, he's moving to right field, so hopefully a less chance that he gets hurt. But we were talking about him becoming a DH because that probably guarantees you the most games. But can he still be productive in his current state?
I mean, he's still going to be a power bat regardless of what happens with his average, which is something that's starting to take a bit of a decline. But unless you get him off the field, he's still going to get hurt. It's been what, mainly back issues has been the big thing that's popped up frequently the last couple of years, and so he'd be much better off if he's on the as a DH on the bench a lot of the game And then let's say he takes a swing, something happens, he can get some treatment mid-game, and then he can get ready for his next at bat. And in right field, all you're doing is limiting a little bit how much he's probably running around on all the plays, since in center field, he basically would track anything in the outfield for any of the gaps and is always moving. In right field, he at least has points where he could kind of take it a little easy. But as soon as that back locks up on him, it seems to like basically halt him for a couple months. So I mean, you can't rely on Trout anymore. You just can't. At least there, it's not proven, and I'm not going to trust that Trout's going to be something that could be relied on anymore with the Angels.
So I mean, this was from Zips. He's projected a 259 average, 30 home runs. I mean, do you see him touching that? I mean, I'm hoping. I think you're hoping for at least 100 games out of him at a minimum, and that seems like a low bar. Of course, you want a full season out of him, but with the injury history, it seems like you're probably going to have at least smaller things at some point. So, I mean, yeah, what is your thought on like the projections?
You need at least you want as it's hard to, you just have me stumped because it's like I don't even know. It's what to me it's pointless. I mean, what I think you're going to get out of Trout is 20 home runs, but in the end, it's regardless of what happens, it's not going to be enough to contribute for the team. It's not going to be enough to really, I feel like, reestablish himself as a productive enough player. I'd rather see him have a really crappy season but play 140 games that tells me he can stay healthy and then worry about getting back to where he was. Then he puts up 20 home runs in 60 games and then gets injured for 100 for the last 100 or so. Like, it's just there's nothing else to really talk about with the Angels. They're going to be the same thing as they are every year. It's a bunch of misfit toys as you put together. You're going to have injuries from Trout. You're going to have injuries from your pitching staff, and your team's going to look like garbage by June.
So here's my issue with the Angels, I think in
If
general.
it's not everything, then something's wrong with you.
Well, it is everything because as we kind of talked about, they signed a bunch of guys, but they're a bunch of veteran talent, and I think the most logical question is what is going to make them competitive because
Nothing.
the
Everyone
issue,
dies.
Jesus, the issue becomes. This is per Baseball America, by the way. They have the worst farm system in the league. Now, you
Mm-hmm.
may ask, what about previous years? Well, in 2024, it was 28th. In 23, it was 25th. In 22, it was 29th. And in 2021, it was 23rd. So they've always had a bad farm system. They've had a less than ideal roster. So they have two guys, by the way, in baseball's top 100. You got Christian Moore, a second baseman who's currently in Double A at 67, and then you have Caden Dana, who is a pitcher who might actually make the roster, but he's only 21. What do they do? Like, do they just have to literally blow this up and just get as many prospects as possible?
They should have blown this up 10 years ago, but they didn't. And now, well, maybe not 10. I'll say 7. I'll be a little nice. But I mean, because you have no one to blow up anymore. I mean, at this point, your biggest way you can blow things up you'd want to is to get rid of Trout because of how much money you owe him, but no one's going to take him. So your only bet right now is to hope that someone like Soler or Mancada or someone who's on a 1-year deal does really, really well, and then you can trade them at the trade deadline for a playoff team that could use them. But I mean, they want to compete, but they have no future of what they can compete for. So they're basically just you got to hope what they want, and really the only way they have a shot is all of the players that they have signed basically have they replicate their best years. So that means Soler hits 30, 40 home runs. You have Moncada bats close to 300 with 20 home runs again. You get a healthy season from Trout that he can hit 30 home runs and bat 280, while you have some of your young guys stepping up, and like Hifo maybe hits 300, or Ohapi it stays healthy and bats 250 with 20 home runs. And pitching wise, Kikuchi would have to do what he did last year, but just on the half where he was in Houston and his ERA was under 3, because while it was in Toronto, it was close to 5. And Tyler Anderson would then need to do what he did a couple years ago while Jansen goes back to his prime and saves 30 games with an ERA under 3. That's what needs to happen, and it's not going to happen. And if anything like that happened, if they're smart, Art, which you're not, is that you would then trade everyone away because they're doing well, and then this way you can get prospects to then try to rebuild stuff.
Do you think maybe that's the plan? Like, do you
No,
think
there
that
is no plan. He doesn't have a goddamn plan. Every year, Art comes out and says, I want to compete, or we're going to compete this year. And everyone's like, why? You have nothing.
But
You have nothing.
But do you think these signings are more to be competitive or more
Yes.
to like trade these guys at the deadline?
Competitive, because he flat out at the beginning of the offseason said, we're going to compete next year. And we're like, with what? A stick and a rock?
I mean, yeah, it's just interesting. Again, I think like you said, like Soler would be a guy at the deadline that maybe if he had a productive season and they still sucked, which you would expect that to be the case, that they would.
But he's also under
maybe
contract for like another year too, right? Isn't because this is
Yeah,
still under the same Giants contract.
yeah, that's
that
true.
It was what 3-4 year deal. First year he gets traded from San Francisco to Atlanta. Then Atlanta, the second the offseason starts, trades him. Like immediate dump because they got Koenig, and then they just were like, all right, we're not tendering him. Goodbye.
Yeah.
So the Angels have him for what, 2 years, I think.
Yeah, so again, I wonder with other guys too, but right, like if they look again to move these guys to the deadline, I mentioned O'Hoppe earlier, and I think like he's a guy that you could definitely, you want to see him have another good season again because last year he had a good season. They had 20 home runs.
Probably the only prospect that they've gotten at all.
Yeah,
within the last like 5 years that actually has like legit potential. And I'm saying that I mean, I might be wrong, and someone like Ward or Nito like didn't come up through the system, but as far as I know, they did. And so O'Hoppe's the only one that's really come from another organization. Philly.
And Moniak, who also came from Philly.
Yeah,
but,
who whipped the freaking do.
I mean, look, so like I was gonna say, I mean, because you say, all right, well, they have the 30th worth farm system, and not to say that O'Hoppe and Sean Noel make it better, but again, I always I say his name and then I think I say it wrong and then I have to correct myself. Sean Owell, I think his name is. He was a first round
George
pick.
Soler.
He was a first round pick in 2023. So yes, he's on the roster, but he's an MLB. He's a prospect, I would say, like O'Hoppe.
Yeah.
So it's bad, but at least you have some guys that you could potentially build around, maybe Renhefo. But God, man, I look at this roster more and more, and the more I really hate it. It's not good. It's again at the beginning of the offseason, I was kind of happy for them, like, oh wow, they're making moves and stuff like that.
No, never.
Because honestly, I was gonna ask this question like coming into this episode, I was thinking of this. I'm like, who do you think would be a better team, the A's or the Angels? And I thought
by at least 15 games.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was like kind of 50-50, but now like when you really look at this roster, I'm like, yeah, I definitely would take the A's at this point in their roster
Why
over
would you
this.
be 50-50?
I don't know, because they signed guys that I guess
you sign a bunch of guys doesn't make you better.
I guess it's like, all right, they signed some guys that have been good at points in their career, but then when it's all together, it's like, oh, I don't know this when it's just that and nobody else.
Like I like jelly beans, I like bacon, I like Cheetos and some ice cream. Let me put it in one sandwich and take a bite.
Like when you just have all that veteran talent and nothing else, it kind of looks pretty bad. So goodness gracious, yeah, this is probably going to be, I would think, the bottom of the AL West. I do think
I don't
the A's
think it's going to be close.
Yeah. Do you think they do better than last year? I think they probably do better than last year.
Yes, but I don't know if they get to 70 wins.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to add other than, again, Anthony Rendon.
Art Moreno, sell the team.
Anthony Rendon is like, I could talk about him ad nauseum. That he was so good with the Nationals, and he just and just like that, it's over. I mean, he's come over when he's played, he's been horrible, and he's barely played. So,
there's nothing to talk about. He's a disgrace, and now he's hurt, so we don't have to talk about him for a while.
Maybe if he comes back and makes an impact, he'll come up in conversation. But for now, That is all we have on day, what did I say? 14? 14
14.
of Around the League in 30 days. Starting to lose count. We've done so many of these. As we're
You've done
halfway
2 weeks
through,
and now
about
you're falling
halfway
apart.
through. I have.
We're only halfway.
We're
Not
only
even. You're one
halfway.
away from halfway.
Make sure to follow us on Twitter at BL_breakdowns. Follow us on Big League Breakdowns everywhere else. Make sure to like the video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel as we will continue to move around the league. And now we are going to the other side of LA, even though the Angels aren't really LA, to the Dodgers and that super team. I'm sure we'll have very little or a lot to say. I'm not really sure, but until then, we will see you next time.
Wear your seatbelt, obviously.
Mike Trout needs to, or he's going to get hurt.